My name is Chandra Zenner Ford. I'm the CEO of our Southwest Idaho campus, and this is my fourth year, I think, participating in this event. I love it. It's very, it reminds us of why we are all here in higher education. So thank you for being here for this in-person and virtual 3-minute thesis event, or 3MT as we call it. University of Idaho has now led this coordination of the statewide event since 2018, and we proudly do so and love the fact that we get to work with and collaborate with our sister institutions. I want to welcome the students, faculty, staff, parents, and friends from BSU, ISU, and U of I here in person and joining via Zoom. I also want to recognize my colleagues from the represented universities, including the president of CSI, Dean Fisher, and we'll hear from him via video later. And a very special thank you to the College of Southern Idaho for hosting us today, and to Provost Todd Schwartz, who is also one of our judges. I also want to recognize CSI's events coordinator, Katie Jones. I don't know if she's here in the room right now, but she has just been incredible helping us facilitate this, and she's been a wonderful partner, so I hope someone lets her know I gave her the shout out. Throughout today's program, you will hear from our university presidents and leadership and view institutional video highlights with a few brag points from all of our institutions, demonstrating how we contribute to innovation in our great state. The 3MT competition is a celebration of student research. Next slide. And the results of their focus on creating new knowledge reminds us all of the impact of higher education in Idaho. Today's student presenters will have only 180 seconds and one slide to present their research. We have some very compelling and thought-provoking presentations ahead. These students were the winners of their recent institutional 3MT competition, so they've already been through one round to get here. And the winners of today's event will have the chance to compete at the Western Regional Competition later in March. So we want you all, if you would like to see the program, for those on Zoom and here in person, use the QR code, and the QR code is up in this back table here if you don't have it for your phone, so you can run back and get it if you don't. For our online audience, you can use the code that you see on your screen, and for our in-person audience, like I said, is in the back of the room. This will give you detailed information on your student presenters and representatives from each of our institutions. And the link to the digital program is also available on University of Idaho's website. And you can just go on the University of Idaho website and then search 3-minute thesis, and it'll pop up. All right. We want to talk about something we do at the end called the People's Choice Voting, which includes people in this room, but also those on Zoom. At the end of our competition, the audience will have a chance to vote on their favorite presentation, and we call this the People's Choice Award. So keep this in mind as you watch today and make a note of your favorite. After the final presentation, you will have the chance to ask questions of the presenters as well. While the judges are deliberating, we have a little session here for if there's anybody in the audience that wants to just know a little bit more. So take good notes and save your questions. In addition, the competitors are vying for first, second, and third place, each with a substantial amount of prize money. But it goes without saying, all of you here are winners just by being here today, so good job. Before we begin the competition, I'd like to showcase and thank the president of CSI, Dean Fisher. President Fisher has been CSI's leader since 2020. CSI serves more than 9,000 students, and Dean has led the path forward to support campus initiatives focused on student retention, the student experience, expanding business and industry partnerships, and ensuring multi-learning modalities to best serve the student needs. We are so grateful CSI has agreed to host the 3-minute thesis this year, and we hope this focus on research inspires students from across the state. Please turn your attention to the screen for a message from President Fisher.
Hello, I'm President Fisher here at the College of Southern Idaho, and it's a pleasure to extend a warm welcome to each of you that are participating in this 3-minute thesis event. It's worth acknowledging the dedication and the passion that you bring to the forefront of academic excellence. This competition, it's a celebration of your ability to communicate complex research in a very concise and compelling manner. It's a skill that's going to serve you well in today's dynamic and interconnected world. Your commitment to inquiry and your pursuit of knowledge, it's going to be a key to your success. Embrace this opportunity to share your insights, ignite your curiosity, and leave a lasting impression with your peers and with the faculty. I extend my gratitude to the organizers, your faculty mentors, and all of those that have supported you on your academic journey. Your hard work and your dedication is going to contribute to your success at this event. I wish each of you good luck. May your presentations captivate, your ideas resonate, all showcasing your exceptional talent. And again, thank you for your commitment to academic excellence. You're welcome here.
All right, that was wonderful. Well, now we have a few more videos to share as we do the housekeeping leading into the competition. And I'd like to share the videos from my boss and University of Idaho President Scott Green and from President Marlene Trump from Boise State University. They will share some welcome remarks. And then after that, I'm going to ask Idaho State University's interim provost and vice president of academic affairs, Adam Bradford, to come to the podium and make a few remarks in person. So we'll show the University of Idaho and BSU videos now.
Today we will watch our best and brightest graduate students discuss the research they've poured thousands of hours into. They will articulate why this research matters and their passion for their topics will shine through. The quality of their work demonstrates the strength of our research programs in Idaho. We'll send today's winners to regional and national 3MT competitions. The topics today vary from science to the humanities and showcase the results of investment in Idaho graduate students. Our state, the nation, and our world are improved by their research. The U of I and our sister institutions are shaping citizens who contribute to Idaho, a bright group of doers and thinkers who care about the planet and will propel our state's economy forward. The U of I invests more than $100 million on research activities each year, from sending antibacterial polymers to the space station to building a rotorcraft that will go to Saturn's moon, Titan. From developing new drought-resistant grains to studying vector-borne disease, our research advances our society in impactful ways. The work presented today will benefit not only our communities, but will also help us address some of the world's greatest challenges. Here in Idaho, we are creating teachers, doctors, nurses, scientists, and farmers that will go on to make a huge impact on our state and our country. We are committed to supporting transformative student experiences. At the University of Idaho, 66% of our undergraduates participate in hands-on research, and we award over 600 teaching and research assistant positions for students each year. We are proud of the life-changing education we provide at the University of Idaho, Boise State University, and Idaho State University. We will continue to deliver accessible, high-quality education at a great value for the state of Idaho. We have 3 great institutions in Idaho working on research that impacts lives around the world. The 3MT event demonstrates how we can take complex, detailed academic research and make it understandable to the citizens of our state. Most importantly, this event showcases how our research will impact our communities and the world. Enjoy the 3MT competition.
Congratulations on reaching this milestone in your academic journey. It's so exciting to have you here today. I know the kind of incredible work, dedication, and intellectual power it requires to do the work that you're doing on your thesis. And it's such an achievement, not just for your life personally, but on the impact it makes on many fields of knowledge and on our world. Graduate education is such a powerful way of advancing not only your future, but all of us. One of the things I'm so proud of at the university is that we don't just share knowledge, we create it. And our graduate students are knowledge creators, impacting the world around us and your fields of study with your new insights. Good luck to each of you. I'm so excited to hear all of your incredible work.
At this time, we would like to have Adam Bradford come forward from Idaho State University, and we very much appreciate you traveling to Twin Falls, and I know you just raced in, so we didn't even let you catch a breath, but thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thanks so much. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm so sorry to have been just breezing in. And I wanted to, on behalf of Idaho State University, first of all, thank CSI and my good friend Todd Schwartz for hosting us here today. And then second, congratulate you on reaching this stage of the 3MT competition. Our esteemed presidents of the two universities that you've just heard from had a lot of nice things to say, and I wanted to add to their comments for you, just put sort of one additional thought into the thought bucket today, or onto the radar. I spend a lot of time traveling around the state, meeting with different stakeholders, talking with folks about the value of what you do and what graduate education means to not only the state of Idaho, but to us as a human community, not just even a national community or regional community, but to us as people. You don't have to look very far back in history to see how curious, engaged, thoughtful people who are willing to ask questions and pursue the answers to those questions can make significant, meaningful contributions to our ability as a human people to move forward in this world. We need that now more than ever, and we need it in a variety of different fields. We need it in the social sciences, in the humanities, in the arts. We need it everywhere. Thank you for being willing to pursue your interests and your passions. You're going to do it over the course of your career and your life because of your personal interests, but I also want you to know that you have an obligation and a responsibility to do it for all of us. And I hope you will remember that, and remember that the impacts you make are that broad and that significant. I look forward to hearing what you have to say today. It's my favorite event of the year because I love basking in your brilliance. I'm really looking forward to that. So thank you so much. Thank you for making a few minutes for me to be able to speak. It's so good to see colleagues and friends here. So nice to be on CSI's campus. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. I'm glad you made it. I have a few more people to thank before we introduce our judges. I'd like to especially thank the university deans of the College of Graduate Studies from each of those institutions. Jerry McMurtry from the University of Idaho, Scott Lowe from Boise State University, and Interim Dean Tracy Collum from Idaho State University. I know that there is a ton of work on your part to pull this off and get the students excited about it. Your work and dedication to this event is vital in making it all a success for everyone here. And I'd also like to give a big shout out to all of the University of Idaho staff in both Moscow and Boise who collaborated with CSI to pull together the details for today. It takes a ton of teamwork and effort to bring this competition to life. I'd especially like to give a shout out to Donna Stolaroff, and she's here, the timer today, so thank you, Donna. All right, now I get to introduce our distinguished panel of judges. And first of all, I want to thank all of you for taking time to be here today. We've got people on Zoom and in the audience, and then the students here. But it really means the most to these students that are here, that have prepared and made their speech as fast as possible to get every word in they can in 3 minutes. So we are so grateful for that. So first, I'd like to introduce Dr. Amy Rice Deutsch. She is the professor of biology at the College of Southern Idaho. Amy earned a Bachelor of Science in Biology from the University of Victoria and a PhD in Molecular, Cellular, and Developmental Biology from Indiana University, Bloomington. She has taught in the biology department at CSI since 2004 and was the CSI program leader for Idaho in Brief from 2009 to 2019, 10 years. That's pretty impressive. Amy loves being in the classroom and has fun experimenting with teaching techniques. Our second introduction is Lori Likely, and she is the former representative to the Idaho State Legislature who has recently announced her candidacy for the Idaho State Senate. Representative Likely is a native of Salmon, Idaho, and a 1990 graduate of the University of Idaho, with a bachelor's degree in agricultural economics. She and her husband Bill raised their 2 children on the family's Century Farm and Ranch in Jerome. Lori served Idaho's beef industry from the local to the national level. Lastly, is the president of the Idaho Cattlemen's Association. Governor Little appointed Lori to serve on Idaho's Behavioral Health Council in 2020, where she worked within the 3 branches of government to roll out access to more behavioral and mental health services in Idaho, including the rollout of the 988 crisis line. Next, we have Rick Narabout, who is the CEO of the Idaho Dairymen's Association. Rick grew up on his family farm in McBain, Michigan. He moved west after the family dairy was sold in the late 90s and shortly thereafter began a family and his schooling at the College of Southern Idaho and Idaho State University. Rick has been married to his wife, Angie, for 23 years, and they are the parents of 3 daughters. Rick has been with the Idaho Dairymen's Association since 2002, assisting with the association's environmental, legal, economic, legislative, and stewardship efforts. He stepped into the role of CEO in 2017, leading the association's advocacy on behalf of Idaho's dairy farm families. Rick is a respected leader in the state's ag community and currently serves on President Green's Hispanic Advisory Council. Next, we have Tiffany Seeley Case, Dean of General and Transfer Education at the College of Southern Idaho. Tiffany Seeley Case was raised on a farm and ranch outside of Ashton. There's a theme here. We've got a lot of farming and ranching people in this group. She attended Boise State University to compete on the Talkin' Broncos speech and debate team. She graduated from Boise State University in 1996 as a top 10 scholar with a bachelor's degree in communication and English and a minor in political philosophy. And then again, she graduated with a master's in curriculum and instruction in 1999. Tiffany holds secondary and teaching certifications in communication, English, journalism, political science, and philosophy. She spent 1 year teaching at Nampa High School before joining the faculty at the College of Southern Idaho in 1997 to teach in the communication department and assist coaching speech and debate at CSI. When not at CSI, Tiffany, along with her husband Des and son Parker, spend time on the farm in Ashton. And finally, last but not least, the Provost of College of Southern Idaho, Dr. Todd Schwartz. Dr. Schwartz started his academic journey at CSI, where he completed a degree in drafting technology. He spent time in the private sector before returning to CSI to teach in the drafting program. He ultimately was promoted as instructional dean in 2007, and all the while he continued to attend Idaho's public institutions of higher ed and earned degrees from BSU and U of I, ultimately completing a PhD in education from the University of Idaho in 2008. He left CSI for a few years to serve as a state administrator for professional technical education, but returned under President Jeff Fox as the executive vice president and chief academic officer. As provost, Todd has a reputation for collaboration and always looking for ways for all of us to better serve our students and our state's workforce needs. Thank you all for sharing your time. I hope you enjoy it as much as we do, and I think we're just about ready to get started. But first, we have to have Jerry McMurtry come up here, and he needs to reinforce the 3-minute thesis time guidelines and timing and everything, so we're all running by the rules. So Jerry, I'll let you take over.
Thanks. Thank you, Chandra. For those of you new to this event, there are rules. For those of you competitors, these are going to be very familiar to you. So the first rule is you have 180 seconds, 3 minutes to complete your presentation. The timer will start when you start speaking, and you'll see the timer right there in the middle of the auditorium. You're allowed 1 slide. The slide should add value to your speech, and the judges will be looking at that as well. If you do go over the 3 minutes, unfortunately, you're disqualified. I think you're familiar with all of that. And then lastly, I just want to say good luck. I would echo everything that the other presidents have said and the provost, that this is a really amazing event. And it does showcase the breadth and the depth of research we're doing as a state that is changing our world and our universe, looking at some of the research. So thanks, Chandra.
Okay, I think we're ready. We'll bring the first student up to the stage. So I just for context, I simply state the student's name and the institution they're from, and they take it from there. We begin the timing when they begin to speak. So our first student from the University of Idaho is Hala Zahalka.
On a journey of a refugee. Imagine if you were forcibly displaced from your home due to a war, climate crisis, or natural disaster. Imagine if you lived your entire life in a refugee camp. Now imagine if you were the third generation of your family living in exile. In the world, there are 30 million refugees. 70% of them live in prolonged refugee situations. The average stay of a refugee camp used to be 5 years, increased to 20, and still increasing. Many planning approaches for refugee camps have been developed, but they don't consider the prolonged reality of places of refuge, resulting in a whole population living in unsustainable environment, highly dependent on aid with limited economy and prospect. But there is another route. Since refugee camps are lasting for decades, they need to be designed as cities rather than camps. This approach will create livelihood for refugees. However, this approach has never been tested before, and there's no framework for it. Here where my thesis comes in. I am a third-generation refugee, and my thesis aims to create a framework for a city that can be recycled after refugee crises have been solved. This is achieved through exploring traditional planning approaches of refugee camps, identifying the gaps, then testing circular economy principles on a case study, Jabalia refugee camp, the oldest and largest refugee camp lasting for 75 years, located in Gaza Strip. My case study has been destroyed during this war, and it should not be rebuilt as it was before. This struggle must end. I have some findings. Using on-site observations from that camp, data analysis and simulations, I was able to create measurable indicators for a city that can recycle, redesign, repair, and share. I was able to create a framework for a city that's sustainable, resilient, with economic enrichment. And more importantly, I found that refugee camps can be generative and thriving with the right planning. It's time for us to invest in them rather than neglecting them. Thank you.
Well, that was super incredible, and obviously it is a result of personal experience that you decided to focus on this subject. Do you want to elaborate a little bit more on why you chose this?
Yes. I am a Palestinian refugee, and I am a third-generation refugee from my family. And when I see the urbanization of refugee camps and the phases that they go through, and how thinking about refugee camps as temporary is not the key here. It's only making this environment more harsh and more cruel to refugees. Refugee camps need to be reconsidered. And since the reality shows us that refugee camps are lasting for decades, we are talking about 75 years in exile, generations, decades of exile. That needs to be changed, and that's why I wanted to shed the light on this. And especially that I came from a refugee journey, I wanted to make this research as authentic as I can and as a story for all refugees around the world, hoping for a better future for them.
I just have one more question. Have you had a chance to, you alluded to it in your presentation, to speak with anyone who has, been involved with creating a refugee camp or anything? Have you had a chance to directly gather any kind of information like that?
Yeah, in the University of Idaho, I connected with my committee member, John Anderson, and he already is planning to share this thesis with the United Nations Committee, working for the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, hoping for sharing these guidelines that I have found from this research to create a better guidelines for refugee camps. And maybe we will also give it to and share it with the United Nations agencies that work with refugee camps, like the UNHCR, UNRWA, and other agencies.
Thank you. And good luck today. Good job. Thank you. Our next presenter is Caleb Merritt from Boise State University.
This was not the grade I expected when I turned in an 800-page poetry portfolio, aptly titled, Difficulty Minus. My research, couched in autoethnography and the exploration of notoriously difficult poets, like Young-Mi Kim, Renee Gladman, and Cody Rose Clevedence, couches itself and seeks to declare, engaging with difficult poetry is necessary to our literacy. We'll explore this in 3 implications: the practice, the poet, and the population at large. Author of more than 40 books, Alice Notley writes, "I'm going to make this poem better by making it longer and more messy." Let's talk about the practice. Difficulty is at the heart of the writing practice, but it's also at the center of learning. Learning starts from what we know, looks toward what we don't, and inhabiting that middle space, that's engaging with difficulty. Listen, in 3 minutes, I don't have time to defend the humanities. Just suspend your disbelief. Take yourself back to when you were a child. At that age, we were all poets. And it reminds us, learning is about more than a grade. It's about the chaos and the exploration and the play more than efficiency. Difficulty is not just a quirk of poetry, it is at the heart of learning across disciplines. Let's focus in on the poet. The poets we remember are the ones who made us think differently. I recently attempted to get my book published on Amazon, and they denied it. Words were made up, text overlapped. It was too confusing, too difficult. But when I taught my Intro to Poetry students, I wanted them to engage in that same way, to submit to me and have me take seriously those very same difficult works, and then to go and share them with the world. But that begs us to ask the question, why should difficult poetry matter to you? Let's talk about the population at large. When we refuse to engage with difficult poetry, we refuse to engage with difficult poets, which are often simply difficult people, which are often simply people that don't fit inside our neat little boxes. They don't look like us or think like us. They're difficult. They're different. As an autistic poet, I'm not intentionally writing confusing poetry. It's just the way I see the world. Recently, I got some book back with some feedback and a grade. And you know what? I got a B+. But I'm not deterred. We must engage with difficult poetry in order to bring out the complexity, strangeness, and bright, beautiful weirdness in our own lives, our own work, and the very real people right next to us. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I just was thinking the whole time you were talking, when did you first become interested in poetry?
I have this story of, in 3rd grade, I had to memorize The Turkey Shot Out of the Oven by Jack Paletsky, which is obviously very academic type of, but yes, that was probably the start of my training.
Are you from Idaho?
No, so I'm originally from South Dakota, and then most recently moved from Alabama, so I'm doing a little cross-country.
And just, what is your graduate degree? What did you major in at Boise State? What is your background?
Yeah, so went to undergrad over in Nebraska, where I was actually in studio art, and I found my art was talking about words, and so my words started being poetry, and so I ended up applying to BSU poetry, and that's how I got into creative writing.
So when you write poetry, do you try it out on your friends to see what they think about it, or do you like get reactions like that? And
I do, and it's often mixed reviews. It sure is. I do, yeah.
Yeah. Well, good luck to you, and great job.
Thank you so much.
Our next presenter is Saida Malika Akaberry from Idaho State University.
COVID, Alzheimer, they are scary. But what if I tell you it might be some connections between brain disorders such as Alzheimer and viral infections like COVID? It's even scarier. Well, in a world with over 50 million Alzheimer's patients, with over 700 million cases of COVID-19, we've long suspected there are some connections, but the details have remained mysterious. Now, I want to invite you to the world of neuroscience, the journey to the brain, but there is a twist. We're going to go to enigmatic world of viruses and how they affect our brain. Imagine our brain with billions of neurons rely on precise communication. Anything that disturbs this communication can lead to serious issues such as Alzheimer, Parkinson, or even autism. Well, I know it seems a little bit complex, so let me be as clear as possible. Imagine these viruses as unwanted guests to our brain's party. They're causing chaos, they disturb the communication. Our job is to detect and neutralize these troublemakers. Well, in my study, I had two big questions. First, which part of these viruses mess with our brain? And second, how do they do that? To answer this question, I work on 4 important viruses: influenza, COVID-19, herpes, and rabies. Astonishingly, all of these viruses share a common trait. They have a spike-shaped protein on their surface that meddle with our cell membranes. Even more interesting, all of them inhibit the vital receptor in our brain called nicotinic receptor. This receptor responding to nicotine from cigarettes. Well, when it goes to our brain, if we don't use it, we will lose it. Exercise and lifelong learning, they're 2 allies that prevent us from getting the brain disorders in future. However, these viruses disturb brain's functionality and increase this chance in future. Well, you may wonder, okay, why all of this is so significant? Imagine with this information, we have the power to slow down the progression of brain disorders such as Alzheimer. Even we can open the whole new era in neuroscience. We can predict even future and unknown viruses will have any threat to our precious mind. I think we all know our brain is a magnificent masterpiece, and our job is to preserve its beauty and functionality. I think we all agree that my research can be the key to unlocking the secrets of the universe. Thanks for being with me.
It's a super fascinating subject and timely, given the COVID and everything. But I would just love to hear a little bit more about what drew you to this subject and research.
Yeah, so I think COVID was like an alarm that show us that, we are struggling with viruses, and we can't remove viruses from our life. And we know brain disorders are also all really important. So these 2 fields, when they are together, I think they're the most important one. And what is more interesting than we can prevent and we can open new things that predict unknown and future viruses will have any effect to our brain. It can be Alzheimer, it can be Parkinson, or even autism.
So are you from Idaho originally, or how did you end up at Idaho State?
No, I'm not from here. I'm from Iran, and I came here for PhD in Idaho State University. So I'm in biomedical and pharmaceutical sciences PhD.
That's wonderful. This is very applicable then to what you're working on. So
Thank you.
Good job and good luck.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, we'll have a few more of those as we give the judges time to kind of take a breath and catch up on their notes. So our next presenter is Yoram Turleth from the University of Idaho.
"80 years from now, by the end of our lifetimes, between 14 million and 320 million people might have lost their homes to sea level rise. Now, both of these numbers are incredibly high, but today I want to draw your attention to the range that exists between them. This range is a problem because it's incredibly difficult to make policy decisions, to plan coastal infrastructure, if there's this giant uncertainty of 300 million people hanging over our heads. One of the main drivers of this uncertainty on sea level rise is that we don't fully understand glacier dynamics. All glaciers move downhill under their own weight, and the rate at which they move affects how fast ice is transported to lower elevations and how vulnerable it is going to be to melting. Now, the problem is that we can't predict how fast glaciers will flow in the future because we don't fully understand the physics that govern ice flow. My PhD work centers on trying to understand the role that liquid water, present at the base of glaciers, plays in causing the ice to speed up or to slow down. In order to do this, I study a specific glacier located in south central Alaska, and this glacier is so interesting because it underwent a sudden acceleration. Over the course of early 2020, it sped up from flowing at about 1 meter per day to flowing at over 20 meters per day. We call such a speed up a glacier surge, and during the most recent glacier surge, we put out a network of seismometers around the glacier. Now, seismometers also used to record earthquakes. They're these little metal cylinders. You see one in the figure. And they're so sensitive that we can actually use them to record the vibrations in the ground that are caused specifically by liquid water flowing underneath the ice. Now, the blue line you see in the figure shows the intensity, the strength of these vibrations in the ground over time. We use that blue line as an indicator for how fast liquid water is flowing underneath the ice. And so an early result that you see in this figure is that during the period of fast ice flow, there is actually also pretty fast water flow happening underneath the ice. This goes against what we used to believe about glaciers, which was that fast ice flow could only be sustained if there was water trapped underneath the glacier. And clearly this isn't the case, the water's moving. This has some implications, right? It means that fast ice flow could be more prevalent, it could occur more easily than we initially thought. And that might also mean that those estimates of future sea level rise sit at the upper end of that range of uncertainty. So I'm leaving you with bad news, but at least we're getting better constraints on future sea level rise. Thank you.
So the first thing that came to my mind when I saw those pictures, I'm wondering how much time you've spent on a glacier.
That's a good question. This specific glacier, it's usually pretty short field seasons. We're there for about a week every year. Yeah.
And how long ago was that?
So we go there about once a year usually.
Okay.
The seismometers we put in, and then we come back a year later. And we really hope they're still there. Usually they fall into crevasses or the bears come by and they destroy everything. But sometimes they work and we get some data back.
And what got you interested in this subject?
I've always really been interested by glaciers and mountainous environments. They're so dynamic, they change all the time, so they really kind of hold my focus.
And are you from Idaho, or did you move here too?
No, I moved here for grad school, actually. I'm from France.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you very much, and good job.
Thank you.
Our next presenter is Matt Peck from Boise State University.
Bullying impacts more than those directly involved in it. Yet this is usually where our research stops, with a bully and a target. It's taught us valuable things, like how 1 out of 4 students in our schools are bullied, 48% in Idaho, and how these students are susceptible to depression, anxiety, suicide, and substance use. But this is only part of a much bigger story. Typically, the impact of bullying seeps out from schools into our community through major headlines like these. Awful things that afflict us. This has been more prevalent in Idaho as of late. But this is just the tip of the iceberg for the problem of bullying. For those students in the schools, it is a daily, constant struggle. 80% of our students report witnessing bullying. And those who witness have a lot of the same effects as those targets: depression, anxiety, suicide, and substance use. A lot of times this can push them to reinforce the bully as a protective factor, but it could also be a great motivating force to instituting change. I believe these students represent the greatest resource we have in bullying prevention efforts. Think, who is first on the scene when bullying happens? It's the other students, right? The bystanders. They can stop bullying in just 10 seconds, yet only 20% of them do. Why? They simply report that they lack the skills to do so. However, when we equip them with those skills, they not only feel better themselves, bullying also decreases. At the heart of my research is how to better activate these latent heroes. STAC is a bullying bystander intervention program. STAC is an acronym that stands for the 4 pro-social strategies it teaches students to utilize to intervene in bullying situations when they witness. I use STAC in local Idaho schools to better activate our heroes. I found that these students were better in tune with bullying, better aware of when it's happening, had more confidence to intervene, and utilize strategies when they had an opportunity to do so, thereby reducing bullying. It is my hope that if we start to think about bullying differently, we can start to flip headlines like these around. We can better activate our secret superpower, the students, those latent heroes who are always around, ready to step in with STAC to make change to help their peers, creating safer communities and schools. Thank you.
So when I was listening to your presentation, I was thinking of the recent testimony to Congress with the social media executives talking about bullying and things through social media channels. Mm-hmm. And so how do you, have you looked into sort of how that plays into all of this, or is this more the in-person interactions?
Yeah, cyberbullying is of course on the rise in our technological society, and these strategies work great in those settings as well, where there's so many witnesses. Now we're really increasing the amount of those students, right?
Have you been a teacher, or you worked in schools? Is this part of the reason why you're interested? What is your background?
I have not. I've certainly been in schools as a student, but now just as a researcher, trying to just create better schools for my kids and our communities.
No, it's a very noble goal, and I think it's something that's been on our minds with the recent media attention to it. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Our next presenter is Aylin Lee from Idaho State University.
Ready to have some fun? Let's go travel. So today, we are actually going to travel to Taiwan. Wait, I see some of the nervous faces, which is understandable. Going to a new place without knowing the language is actually going to be challenging. But don't worry, you got me. I'll be your tour guide for the whole trip. So, while we are having fun in Taiwan, enjoying all the food, all the beautiful views, my mind starts to wander. As a clinical psychology student, we study mental health and psychotherapy a lot. So we actually wanted to know, how does Taiwanese people view towards psychotherapy? Because we know research has shown that Asian people actually are less likely to share their mental health concerns, not even to share with others, but also even with their parents, not to mention seek help. So today we actually wanted to know what's their attitude and preference towards seeking psychotherapy in order to promote their intentions to seek help. But today our focus is only going to be in K-12 teachers. The reason why we chose this population is because Taiwanese people, they value education a lot, which oftentimes put a lot of stress on their teachers. And K-12 teachers' mental health is actually going to be impact not only their work performance, but also their students' well-being too. So that's really important for us to know more. However, in this area, it's really understudied in Taiwan. So let's bridge some tiny gap here. So we asked K-12 teachers to rate their intention to seek psychotherapy based on different resources, like their friend, their parents, their colleague, student, boss, significant others. Then we also asked them to rate their favorite mental health methods, resources, like individual psychotherapy, group counseling, various mental health resources, workshop. So turns out K-12 teachers are more likely to seek psychotherapy if they were referred by their friend and their partners. Well, I guess nobody wants to be told by the boss that you need help. Then they are more likely, they really preferred their individual psychotherapy and mental health reading materials. So with this information, how do we move forward? We actually wanted to promote a really safe environment to let them share their mental health concerns. And we also wanted to invite their partners, invite their friend to talk with them in order to promote the intention to seek psychotherapy. Lastly, we wanted to make all the handout mental health resources, individual counseling available to them to help them bridge the gap. Well, I hope you enjoy the trip with me. Thank you for your time.
I get to ask you a few questions.
Sure.
Before you get off the stage. Thank you very much. So maybe elaborate a little bit more on the K-12 environment for teachers in Taiwan that you think is maybe unique or special.
Yeah, I think, well, to be honest, most of the K-12 teachers in Asian places, they're actually very special because they have a lot of stress. Like their parents, their school actually put a lot of pressure for them because they wanted their students doing well in school. So they also kind of like spend a lot more time helping students out. They wanted to make sure you go to college. So that's actually a really high standard.
So lots of pressure is what you're saying, lots
Yes.
of pressure. I feel like in this country, it is getting more and more so parental involvement as well. So this research might help other groups as well. So how do you hope to conduct it?
You mean in here?
Research? Yes.
In here?
How do you hope to conduct it a little more specifically?
So probably we also wanted to know how much pressure they're having, like kind of maybe a survey-wise, kind of like, okay, their mental health status, that kind of things, to help understand more.
Sounds great, and I think great job and good luck.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Scott Matlock, underrated recruit, has built himself into one of the best defensive players in the Mountain West.
What would you do if you couldn't fail? Would you see every setback as a catalyst to keep going? This is the innovator's mindset, because innovation demands daring. Is finding thousands of ways that don't work, and the one that changes everything. It's when your unrelenting spirit sees the world's needs and says, I will create something better. So, what will you do? Will you let your genius run wild? Give yourself the space to be great. Set your sights on something even bigger, because we know changing the world doesn't happen by chance. It comes out of the blue.
Okay, to our next group. Our next presenter is Alexandra Pace from the University of Idaho.
Calves are in flames. I mean, they're inflamed. Have you ever been outside on a really smoky day? Imagine being unable to breathe in anything but that smoky air for days, weeks, or even months at a time. This is the reality for more than 40% of dairy cattle in the United States. Wildfires are becoming more severe with climate change, and they produce excessive smoke that can travel really far distances. This smoke is made of toxic particles and gases, which we know harms humans and animals. Dairy cows that inhale wildfire smoke produce less milk, and this can be a major financial burden on dairy producers. Yet no one has studied the effects of wildfire smoke on dairy calves, and they're also very important for dairy producers because they're the future of the dairy industry. So I went on a mission. I wanted to understand how dairy calves respond to wildfire smoke. To do this, I followed female dairy calves over the course of several wildfire seasons. Now, during these wildfire seasons, we typically see unhealthy levels of smoke for at least a few days, if not weeks at a time. I noticed dairy calves have inflammation in their entire body whenever there are these smoke events. So it made me wonder, what exactly is happening inside the lungs of these calves? Respiratory problems are already the #1 cause of death in dairy calves and can affect their milk production later in life. So my next step was to understand how the calf lung responds to wildfire smoke. And I wanted to do this by looking right into the lung. I used lung ultrasounds to assess the severity and the extent of lung consolidation. Consolidation is essentially fluid replacing air in the small airways of the respiratory tract. So wherever there's more consolidation, it's much harder for calves to breathe properly. I also wanted to understand how white blood cells inside the lung respond to smoke. These are very important for defense against things like pathogens or particles inside the lung. To do this, I collected samples of respiratory fluid and looked at the cells under a microscope. Now, I found that during these wildfire events, the consolidation was increased, and that lasted for several days. As for the white blood cells, I found that macrophages increased. Now, macrophages are involved in inflammation, and they're kind of like the cleanup crew of the cell world. They help defend against things like pathogens and even particles like smoke particles, so that might be why we saw that response. Now, these results tell us that calves are likely more susceptible to inflammation in their lungs and therefore respiratory problems when they're exposed to smoke. By tackling the burning questions as to how the calf lung responds to wildfire smoke, we can help dairy producers find solutions for their animals so that one day we can outpace the negative effects of wildfire smoke in dairy cattle health and production, and hopefully see a few less inflamed calves. Thank you.
So I'm sure I'm not the first one that thought of this, but one of the other things I think about is if the milk or the yogurt that comes from this cow tastes different or is different. And I'm sure you don't know the answer to that, but that's where my mind goes, is how does it impact the end result?
You are absolutely not the first person to ask me that question, and you are correct. I do not know the answer to that. It would be a very interesting area of future investigation, though. Actually, some research out of California shows us that grapes that are in wildfire smoke have a different wine flavor that comes out of them. So it would be really interesting if we can have smoky milk, I suppose.
So what got you interested in this research?
That's a great question. Well, so I'm from Nebraska originally, and there's not really wildfire smoke there, so when I learned about the wildfires here, I thought that was very interesting. Mainly because when you search cattle and the environment, for example, in Google, a lot of the times you'll see how cattle impact the environment, but less about how cattle might be impacted by the environment. I think that's equally important for dairy producers for a lot of reasons, but one of them being anytime that we have less production in animals, we're contributing to climate change as well. So it's a circular pattern, and I think it's very important to consider both sides of that.
Thank you. Good job. Good luck. Our next presenter is Haley Bridgewater from Boise State University.
Have you ever gotten a shot? Probably everyone in this room has. It's an uncomfortable experience. And if you're one of the 1 in 4 American adults with a fear of needles, you're going to do everything you can to avoid them. You might even agree with my brother when he says, I'm not getting a flu shot, I don't want a painful vaccine for something I might still catch. Maybe if I can get rid of the pain and I can make it less likely he'll get sick, maybe he'll get vaccinated. By using an injected vaccine, we're activating our systemic immune system. In other words, our immune cells are patrolling our body, looking for the pathogens carrying the markers we vaccinated against. When they find them, they mount an immune response and clear the pathogens from our body. Unfortunately, this means that the pathogen was already in our body, wreaking havoc. While you won't get as sick as you otherwise would have, you could still get sick. As a vaccine developer, I want to address this. I want to prevent transmission and not just severe infection. One way to do this is to vaccinate through the skin using microneedles. The microneedles that I work on dissolve in about 15 minutes, and they're made of sugar, just simple table sugar, which is sucrose, and a cellulose-based sugar from plants. These microneedles come on patches of over 100 microneedles, and each patch is only the size of a stamp. Each individual microneedle is about the length of the thickness of your fingernail. You can barely see these with your eyes, which means you can barely feel them, making this a painless way to get vaccinated. Another benefit is that you don't have to go to the doctor to get these vaccines. It's as easy as wearing a Band-Aid for 15 minutes. These microneedles will pierce just through your epidermis, which is the thin protective layer on your skin, and they'll dissolve into your dermis, which is the thick layer of skin that contains your sweat glands, your blood vessels, your nerves, your hair follicles, and importantly for vaccines, immune cells. By activating the immune cells in your skin, you're going to get that systemic immunity that you get from a shot, but you're also going to get a unique local immunity. Your immune cells in your skin, including the skin of your mouth and nose, are going to be looking for that pathogen you vaccinated against and preventing it from getting into your body. So now I have a response from my brother. Whoop. Now I have a response from
So I'm personally all for this because I'm a procrastinator and I know I need to go get my vaccine and I wait and wait. And so like sounds like some amazing thing. So have they already had any kind of trials to show that these patches work? I'd like to know a little more about that.
Yeah, so the flu vaccine actually is already licensed in Europe to be delivered through skin patches. This is just an alternative patch that hopefully we can use in the United States. It also is instead of silk, so there's less allergens.
So what is your degree?
I am getting a PhD in biomolecular sciences.
So this is great, applicable, that kind of thing. So what got you interested in this kind of background in school and everything?
Yeah, I've been interested in infectious disease for a while, and I actually got my start in the infectious disease world working in a tuberculosis diagnostics lab. And it was super interesting and I was super passionate about it, and I learned that even with treatments, you can't actually prevent any long-term outcomes. So if we can prevent the disease as a whole, then people are better off and healthier in the long run. So that's why I got interested in vaccines.
Right. Great, good job, and thank you. Good luck. Our next presenter is Adam Zambi from Idaho State University.
If you were to look at the 3 trout streams pictured here, do you think they could all hold viable fish populations? Or based on the size of any of these streams alone, do you think any populations might be more vulnerable to extinction than the others? Well, this is more than just a thought experiment, as it's a relevant conservation question for a fish species that calls our backyard home. Native to the Snake River watershed is the red band trout, and historically, this species had large swaths of interconnected habitat. Unfortunately, though, this isn't the case currently. Due to habitat loss as well as fragmentation, this species is just barely hanging on in little small patches of remnant habitat, often in protected headwater streams. And so with these small populations, we worry about low genetic diversity because they're very vulnerable to things such as inbreeding depression or genetic drift. And so if a population has low genetic diversity, it's kind of a red flag for conservation. These populations are likely to have maladaptive traits become fixed, or they're likely to have loss of evolutionary potential for our changing conditions that trout currently face. And so my thesis research wants to answer the question, how much stream do fish actually need before they lose genetic diversity? And so to answer this question, I've conducted a field study in the Snake River watershed, where I visited 34 different streams that hold red band trout. And so at each of these streams, we have different sizes of habitat available. If you look on the far left, that's the middle fork of Deer Creek. Very small amount of water. A tumbleweed there is covering the whole wetted width. So not a great place to be a trout. Then the far right here, that's the Jarbidge River. A lot more water. You'd expect a lot better place to be a trout. And so at each of these populations, I went and sampled 30 fish and took little pieces of fin clips to bring back to the lab for DNA extraction and sequencing for genetic diversity. And then I compared that data to how much habitat was available. And to get these measures, I went out and took stream discharge measurements at base flow. So this is just a snapshot for how much water, how much habitat do these fish have. And so when I looked at my results, well, first I compared these more medium-sized streams and these streams with lots of water. How do they compare? Well, there's no real difference. Genetic diversity was about the same. Fish appeared to be doing pretty well. But then let's gander over at our little streams. This is where genetic diversity just fell off a cliff. Populations just showed these huge red flags for very low genetic diversity. And so I modeled this relationship. How diverse is a population genetically versus the amount of water in the stream? And I found this sort of break point to where once we hit a certain amount of minimum habitat, that's when populations don't really turn back. And so this is a powerful conservation quota I found. This is how much water we need to conserve, how to make sure that streams have this just right amount of habitat or above, so that for generations upon generations to come, we can protect trout in our streams and protect the whole ecosystems that we rely on and call our home waters. Thank you, guys.
Good job. I always have that really race to the end before the timer goes off. But I'm just wanting to ask how much, when I think about this, I think about climate change and how things are drying up, and I'm assuming that's part of your motivation at looking at this. As you even look at the streams in Idaho, have you looked at historical data on how large those streams have been in the past?
Yes, exactly. And a lot of streams just have sort of dwindled. We get less and less snowpack in certain years, and it kind of fluctuates. We get good years, we get bad years, but we don't know when these bad years come, where are the places we should kind of check, like what streams might be really, really vulnerable to bad years, and how can we have biologists go out there and say, are these populations maybe supplementation? Are these kind of the ones that are conservation priorities for habitat restoration projects? Because we do fluctuate naturally, but it's just important to know what populations are at risk.
So what got you interested in all of this subject matter?
What am I interested in? Well, I love, love, love fish. I've kind of always had fish on the brain, and so I would just love to see just as much conservation as possible for populations at risk, and so that really some of these streams you could see in sort of our lifetime fish fade from, so I'd love to see that not happen.
That's great. And so where are you from?
I'm from Texas, but I've always had just streams on the brain. I was a canoe whitewater guide for a little bit, so rivers and things that live in them are very important to me.
Awesome. Well, great. Thank you and good luck. Thank you. I love people from all over the world today. This is pretty cool. I love it. I love watching all those videos. Our next presenter is Abby Rode from the University of Idaho.
The youngest person to ever be executed was 14-year-old George Stinney Jr. in 1944. George Stinney, a young black boy, was accused of murdering 2 white girls. His all-white jury deliberated for only 10 minutes before finding him guilty and sentencing him to death. 70 years later, George Stinney was exonerated of the very crimes he was killed for. Sadly, this is not the first time, and it will not be the last time, that black children are mistreated in our criminal justice system. This mistreatment may be a result of the adultification bias. Biases are essentially our brain's ways of creating shortcuts to help us understand this really complex world that we live in. Specifically, adultification bias makes us view brown and black children as more criminal, more responsible for their actions, and more mature than their white peers. We also misperceive them as being older. Now, this is really important in our criminal justice system because when cases are weak, we then use our biases to fill in the blanks that the evidence simply cannot. So, my thesis tests to see that if we increase critical thinking, if we can then decrease sentencing disparities between black and white children. Specifically, I hypothesize that using stereotype incongruent language child rather than stereotype congruent language juvenile will result in lower scores of community service hours. To test this, participants were shown black and white defendants, as we can see paired up on the left-hand side of my screen. And then that defendant had a case that either had strong or weak evidence and referred to the defendant as a child or a juvenile. Participants were then asked to rate the defendant on culpability, dangerousness, and sophistication maturity. Then lastly, were asked to recommend a length of community service hours. Now, if we take a look at that big graph in the middle, the gray line shows us weak cases, and we can clearly see that black defendants described as children rather than juveniles received significantly lower amounts of community service hours. And then all the way to the right, we can see the 3 remaining factors. So, my results do suggest that if we increase critical thinking, we can decrease sentencing disparities. So, if you happen to be a lawyer and you're representing a black teenager with a weak case, referring to them as a child rather than a juvenile can have life-altering effects on their case. Thank you.
Thank you. So, when you're looking into this, is your major criminology by chance? Or
no, it's legal psychology. Yeah.
It's psychology. And what is your, are your plans to go to law school possibly?
No, so it's quite new, but I was just accepted into a PhD program for psych and law, and then also admitted to their Masters of Legal Studies. So I will be doing that.
And what got you interested in this specific study?
Yeah, there's a study by Goff and colleagues published, I think, in 2017, and it showed the disparity between black and white children, and I really was interested in how we can reduce that.
Excellent. Where are you from?
Coeur d'Alene.
Oh, yeah. You're from Idaho.
Yep.
One of the few. Well, thank you and good job.
Yes, thank you.
Our next presenter is Gianna Jimenez from Boise State University.
Think about everything you have done in the last 24 hours. What did you have to eat and drink? What kinds of soaps and lotions did you use? Did you have to sit in traffic on the way here? These simple, everyday things are just some of the many ways that we can be exposed to potentially harmful chemicals. What if there's a chemical that was linked to cancer that could be found in your favorite snacks and in pantry staples such as oatmeal? You might even have a container of this substance sitting on a shelf in your garage right now. And what if not only did we not know the true health effects of this substance, but we did not even have a way of determining how much people are being exposed to? The herbicide glyphosate, commonly known as Roundup, is the most extensively used agricultural chemical in the world. Apart from cancer, recent research suggests it may have other harmful effects as well, such as increasing the risk of preterm birth. With over 800,000 tons of glyphosate used agriculturally around the world each year, when you pour out a bowl of cereal in the morning, you could also be sitting down for a bowl of Roundup. Despite these concerns, there is no validated method to determine our true exposure. Glyphosate exposure is primarily assessed using urine analysis, and commonly with only 1 to 2 urine samples. But a single urine sample only tells us what someone was exposed to yesterday. That is because the biological half-life of glyphosate is very short, which means levels in the body can fluctuate drastically depending on factors such as recent diet. But we don't want to know what someone had for breakfast last Monday. We want to know what people are being exposed to over weeks, months, and years. That is the kind of exposure that leads to diseases such as cancer. My thesis is the first study of its kind to determine how many urine samples would be required to accurately assess chronic glyphosate exposure. Because pregnant women are a vulnerable population that may be especially susceptible to glyphosate, my study analyzed data from a sample of 40 pregnant women who provided 11 urine samples each over 6 months of pregnancy. Using a novel technique called bootstrap resampling, I was able to create new simulations of our data. These simulations showed that collecting only 1 to 2 samples per participant would have incorrectly assessed their exposure over half the time. Instead, at least 6 samples would have been required, a number that is rarely collected during research studies. Additionally, these results confirm that current research investigating the health effects of glyphosate exposure are insufficient, putting the health of people around the world at risk. But glyphosate is only one of thousands of chemicals currently in use. The US alone develops over 1,000 new synthetic chemicals every year, many of which have yet to be rigorously tested for safety. While many of these chemicals have the potential to cause harm, you cannot know what you cannot measure. The conclusions found in my study could change the way that we do exposure research and protect people's health around the world. Thank you.
So I find this very fascinating. I grew up on a farm and Roundup was a part of it, and have learned more about glyphosate and its preponderance around the world. And so you said you chose the pregnant women to test their exposure to it, and what was explain a little bit more behind that idea.
So recent epidemiological research suggests that glyphosate may have health harms apart from cancer, which has really been the main one that has been researched. Is that the concern is that maternal consumption of glyphosate, which you can get, for example, through diet, could increase the risk of preterm birth, low birth weight, and potentially even increase the risk of developmental harm for the child in the future.
So what is your background, your undergraduate degree and your majors?
So I got my bachelor's in psychology, and the reason I chose to go into public health is because I saw that individual interventions can only do so much. Public health is all about doing the most good for the most people. And when you think of something like glyphosate, that is something that affects the health of everybody sitting in this room right now.
Thank you. And where are you from?
I am straight from the Treasure Valley.
Well, good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our final presenter is Don Amos from Idaho State University.
To quote the infamous Salt and Pepper, let's talk about sex. Well, hang on. More accurately, let's talk about some things that can be a result of sex, such as unintended pregnancy and sexually transmitted infections, also known as STIs or STDs. You see, unintended pregnancy and STIs are actually very common. It's estimated that 43% of all pregnancies in the US are unintended, and that at any given time, 1 in 5 Americans have an STI. So if these two things are so common, you can't help but wonder, how often do unintended pregnancies and STIs co-occur? Unfortunately, we currently have no research that answers this question for us. And that is a very big problem. Because regardless of the outcome of a pregnancy, having an STI while experiencing an unintended pregnancy can lead to serious health risks. In the best of circumstances, it results in inconvenience and higher health care costs. But in the worst of circumstances, it results in death of women and infants. My research aims to address this gap in knowledge by answering 2 specific questions. Firstly, how often do unintended pregnancies and STIs co-occur? And secondly, what factors predict their co-occurrence? I'm using the CDC's National Survey of Family Growth and taking various demographic variables such as age, race, ethnicity, and income, as well as various risk factors such as whether someone uses hormonal birth control or condoms, and seeing how this predicts the co-occurrence of unintended pregnancy and STIs. We hope this will give us a better understanding of unintended pregnancies and STIs so we can develop better interventions that help women live healthier, more empowered lives. We can't forget that every single one of us in this audience was brought into this world by a woman, and every single person of the next generation will be too. So to improve the future health of our nation, we must improve women's reproductive health. So next time you hear the song, Let's Talk About Sex by Salt and Pepper, I hope you think a little bit about the essentiality of this research.
All right, excellent.
Thank you.
So I'd like to hear a little bit more. You said you're using the CDC database to do the
Yes, ma'am.
research and sort the data and pull that. Maybe explore that a little bit more, how you're going to collect all this data and analyze it.
Yes, well, luckily I'm not collecting the data because it's already been done.
Yeah.
My focus in grad school, aside from public health and reproductive health, is working with big data sets, so performing statistical analyses on these things. So the CDC has something called the National Survey of Family Growth, which is conducted periodically and is a massive sample of US men and women that are within a reproductive age. So we gather a ton of really useful data on sexual health behaviors and family data and living data, all this. So we actually have the data to determine how often unintended pregnancies and STIs co-occur. Nobody just has ever thought of doing the analysis on it, and it's important to do so.
And so do you perceive like almost a public health campaign to educate people more based on what you learn?
Not necessarily, but I would hope to. I'm extremely passionate about taking what I learn in my research and applying it and, encouraging everyone else to hear what we've learned so far. I really try to make sure research goes outside of the ivory tower of academia. So my hope is we can, hold events like this and tell people more about the work that we do.
Right. And where are you from? I've been asking everybody.
I'm actually from a really small town in northern Idaho called Athol, but
I know where that is.
Okay, for those of you who don't, it's kind of Coeur d'Alene area, but yeah, it's a beautiful area there. My family is watching from over there, actually.
Oh, good job, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, very impressive. I know I wasn't that smart when I was that age, so super impressive group of students from all the institutions. Now we have the tough part, which is for the judges. Thankfully, they're in charge of that, and I'm not. They'll tell their scores a little bit, and when you're done with your final notes, then Jerry McMurtry will lead you to a private area for you to deliberate on your results. So you don't have to rush out. You can take a few more minutes if you want. This is the time, though, when we would like to invite those of you that are in the audience to vote for your favorite among the presenters. And I think Donna might have some ballots for anyone raise their hand that would like to vote. Oh, look, we've got some ballots out there. And then for the online audience, there's going to be a survey that will pop up on your screen. And you should select your favorite presenter and press submit. The survey will only be open for a few minutes, and please enter your vote and only one vote. You can scroll down and see the full list of names. And then while everyone's voting, if you'd like to consider any questions you'd like to ask any of our presenters, you can take a minute to do that. We can have you come up front and use the microphones, or even just stand up and ask your question. This is a super informal time while we let the judges do their work. And so there's no rush. If you think of a question 10 minutes from now, just raise your hand and we'll make sure that happens. But super impressive group. Good job, you guys. Everybody was amazing. So, great work. So I will start with third place, second place, first place, and then the People's Choice Award is the order in which I'm going to read these. And as a reminder, we would like deans and judges to stick around too to take a few pictures afterwards. We'd like to have some photo evidence of everything that happened, and obviously we'll take some separate photos of each winner with their plaque and everything. So don't leave after we get done with this. All right, the third place for today with an award of $1,000 is Yoram Turla from University of Idaho. Come on up and we will hand the... Okay, Tracy and Scott, come on up. Oh, from Idaho State University. Did I say the wrong university? I'll wait for them to get up here, sorry. Thank you for joining us on the stage for the photos later. Our second place for a prize of $1,500 is Alexandra Pace from University of Idaho. Congratulations. All right. And then our first place with an award of $2,000 is Abigail Rohde from the University of Idaho. And you know, I have to say something, I've been doing, this is my 4th year. I think that's the longest the judges have had to deliberate. It was a very difficult decision, I can tell. So, you know, I have never seen every single presenter so polished. So all of you, I mean, it's just incredible how polished everyone was. So before I announce the People's Choice, I just want to say a little one-off about this, because last year's People's Choice Award went on to compete at the national level. He won at the regional, and then he went on and competed at the national level. So pretty exciting. There are more things to do beyond this. The People's Choice Award is $500, and that will be Saida Malika Akaberry from Idaho State University. Congratulations. And just so you all know, we had about 50 people on Zoom participating in the program and listening in. So we had a good group punching in. And next year we are going to hold this at Idaho Falls, I believe, is a location for next year, and in cooperation with the College of Eastern Idaho. So congratulations, everyone, and stay up here for photos, please.